Hey friends, and welcome back to Thursday Q&A with Leigh. Full disclosure, I'm actually pre-recording this one because as you can see, I'm in a hotel room in Chicago with some meetings for the Realtor Relief Foundation, but you guys have questions that you like to send through ye old DM channel. So I'm going to answer your questions you asked between last Thursday and this one. So hopefully if you've logged in, you're still going to catch something that will help you be stronger in your real estate business. And you can always use the comments and just say, hey to me, or you can say, hey, in the comments and tell me what questions you would like me to answer. So the first question that was submitted by Ron is, what are your thoughts on the real estate market between now and the end of the year? Those of y'all that already know what I'm going to say, you can chime in. It depends, right? Because there is no good, clear-cut answer, and any pundit that you look at, any economic forecast you look, is going to have its own different set of opinions. Also, I've got to get y'all to understand this, and you've got to get the public to understand real estate is hyper-local. And by that, I mean, it's zip code specific and it's neighborhoods within zip codes. In fact, in Charlotte, I can give you a very clear example. 28277 is the Valentine area of South Charlotte. That is a hot tamale zip code. 28214 is in West Charlotte and has some issues around the air traffic control. And so if you're under a pattern from Charlotte Douglas Airport, you're going to have a different real estate market than somebody who is in the she part of town. You have to know that as a real estate professional. Neither one is better than the other, but they're going to experience market conditions differently. And the way you got to look at it is this. The zip codes that have everything going on, the retail, the commercial, the transportation, the schools, the everything, are going to be a little more resilient when market conditions change. Any area of town, conversely, that has any issues with schools, transportation, retail, commercial, housing, any of that is going to sink first. And that's just how the market works. It's also why apps and AI are never going to bring the same kind of value to the table that an experienced realtor is. So I want you to know that everything I tell you here, you've got to do some homework in your zip code. And anybody that's buying and selling in the Charlotte area, this is one of those things you've got to be asking your realtor as you interview. What do you think about the market in my specific zip code in my area? And by the way, there's a realtor in every zip code around the country because our people are everywhere. And so anyway, my thoughts on that, if I look at the greater Charlotte market, so I'm obviously going to be more versed on Cabarrus County and Mecklenburg County, Union County, Iredell and Gaston than anywhere else because I do the research on these markets. Our markets in this part of North Carolina are experiencing huge job growth, which means we have new people coming in. We also have a housing shortage like most parts of the country. So I do think we're going to see a lot of rocky times in the real estate market. We are going to see buyers continue to feel a very big sense of unrest because of interest rates, because it changes what they can buy. We're going to see sellers that are a little frustrated that they didn't sell 12 months ago when the market was hot, and we're looking at a different kind of market condition. We're also going to have to pay attention to the fact that home equity lines have been tapped at the highest rate in recorded history. So we have a lot of our neighbors out there that are tapping the cash in their equity to handle the rising cost of inflation. And all of those are things you've got to pay attention to as to when it impacts your market. So when we have job growth, then the risk of somebody being underwater losing a job is a little lower, but it doesn't mean it won't happen because we're also seeing giant companies announcing layoffs going into the end of the year. So my personal guess is that prices will continue to creep upward by 2, maybe 3%. I agree with that economic forecast because there is a floor that is being supported by the lack of housing inventory. I don't think we're going to see these crazy double-digit growth numbers. And I do think that any house that has an issue, it could be a neighbor that doesn't have the same focus on taking care of their property as other neighbors, or it could be power lines, a busy road, a really slopey yard. Those houses may actually see some changes to their value more so than a house that's on a perfect scenario. Long story short, you got to call your realtor. And if you are the realtor, you've got to do more drive-bys. You've got to do more previewing. You've got to do more deep dives into the data so that you know exactly how to answer this question. Okay, what is one thing I wish I knew before becoming a realtor? Lori, I wish I had known how emotional of a business this is, because I am not a warm and fuzzy person, no matter what y'all think by video. I I get really emotional about some things, but I'm not like a super warm and fuzzy person all the time. Now, I will say that having kids made me a lot warmer and fuzzier, but they get the bulk of my warm and fuzzy. But I didn't know coming into real estate, because you go to pre-licensing class and it's talking about state laws and regulations and it's, statutes, and it's really dry. And then you get into the business. I was the lucky one because I got to come in with my dad, and my dad is the king of real estate knowledge. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know. And in a 40-year career in real estate, the man has only one person who doesn't like him. And I think she probably came around because he's just that lovable. Not that side of me, right? So it's not who I am. But my dad put me in his hip pocket and taught me the business. I had to learn how to handle buyers, how to handle sellers. My dad is a big fan of apprenticeship periods because you have to figure out the language and the conversation before you can put all that statutory information into play. And so when I was going on these appointments with him, I'm watching people cry. I'm watching the anger that builds up when the numbers don't match. I see the frustration over showings. And it's really wild about real estate. And I think a lot of y'all would agree that it's such a unique product and it's hard to commoditize it, even though virtual reality and AI and bots and AVMs and all that really tries to commoditize real estate. It's too impossible because humans are so wildly invested in their houses. And you think about this, their babies lay their heads down there to sleep at night, and they have mama's last Thanksgiving there before she passes, and they bought those floors on clearance at Lumber Liquidators and installed them themselves. And we always know when you install it yourself, but anyway, so you have all these different things that get wrapped up into the house. And then the realtor comes in, and you're not just delivering a market analysis, you're not just delivering a marketing plan, you're personalizing a solution to somebody's single biggest financial instrument they'll ever own, which is simultaneously completely wrapped up in emotion. And so if I'd known that before I got into real estate, I still would have gotten in because frankly, I had job hopped and I needed to land somewhere. And my dad said I should. But what I would have done differently at the beginning, I would have done a little more research into psychology, into consumer behaviors, and I would have done more deep dive on that, which I've done since then. And I think I'm pretty good at reading people, even though I get it wrong all the freaking time. And so as a realtor, if you are early career, all I can tell you is that your source of knowledge is not always just real estate trainers in real estate. It's also a lot of external specialties that can give you so many insights into what's happening with your neighbors, because a great realtor is always going to personalize the solution for the person with whom they're having this intense conversation. And by the way, if you wrap this into the first question, Lori, we're going to have more intense conversations as we come towards the next phase of this market. And you're going to have people with whom you're meeting that don't understand why their area isn't valued the same as other areas. And again, these are things that bots can never explain because there are so many factors. And it's also why independent appraisers are so crazy important to the process. Any automated system is only going to spit out dollars per square foot based on bad information that may have been entered by somebody else. And we call that GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. But an independent appraiser who goes to a property and can use their sniffer and look around at the surrounding houses and the streetscape and look at all the different changes in an area can provide a more robust valuation. Everything is intertwined in this. And it's why I'm so glad y'all are tuned in on these Thursdays. And I'm glad you're thinking ahead into changing markets, because you're going to be unique in the marketplace that desperately needs you. So many of our neighbors just have so many questions. And if they ask the wrong realtor, they might not have an answer that's going to jive with what they need to get accomplished. And in fact, before I answer this next question, I got to tell y'all, I had a message this week from somebody I've known for a long time who's having a problem with the transaction that he's in the middle of. And he came to me for advice because his realtor is inexperienced and didn't know what to do. And while I value being a resource, I just can't answer questions when somebody is in a relationship by law, by agency with another realtor. So I just want to point out for you too, if you've picked somebody, then just tell them if they don't know what they're doing, tell them to ask their broker. You as a consumer in the public, you have the right to ask your agent, to ask their broker, their mentor, there's somebody else where they can get good counsel. But coming to another agent, you have to know, I'd love to help, but there are lines I can't cross. And frankly, my heart does break because it's kind of a messy situation. And as we go into changing markets, more situations are going to get messy. And absolutely, experience matters. If you're early career, it doesn't mean you don't have a chance. But for all that's holy, you better find somebody like my dad that you can offer something to and also receive information from. Now, the third question I got is from Tony, who says, besides making calls, what are some other ways I can up my lead generation for new clients? I always love that. That's an excuse. And I'm going to call you out for it, Tony. And you know I love you, and that's why I'm calling you out. You're looking for a reason not to make phone calls. And you know why? It's because most salespeople, and this is not new to technology era, y'all, most salespeople have call reluctance. And we call it call reluctance because I could put it on your calendar. I could put an assignment on your desk and you'll sit there and go, you just kind of stare at the phone. You're kind of hoping it'll ring and somebody will call you so you don't have to make an outbound call. I get it. And I know why we don't make those phone calls. There's so much psychology at play here. And the biggest reason you don't want to make phone calls is your fear of rejection. You're afraid that somebody's going to answer the phone and light you up and they're going to be awful and cuss you out. But remember, that might have happened in the era of an analog telephone, and I love my analog phone, I'm not going to lie. But in today's era, if you call somebody, they get those two options on the screen. They get decline and accept. If they're not in the mood, they can hit decline. And if they hit accept and start screaming at you, then you just have to delete them and move on because they're in a bad place. And I got to remind you, Tony, if somebody hollers at you, it's not about you. They're not hollering at you. I mean, usually, unless you've screwed up that badly, but most of you have not screwed up that badly. You just, in your head, you've concocted this giant, huge nightmare of a story. Reality is, if you call somebody and they holler at you, something's going on in their life. They might be in the middle of marital troubles, or their kids are a pain in the tail, or they're just hot. This week it's hot, and when people are hot, they don't act right. And we're in the South down here, and so we have humidity with the heat. And we say to all these people that move in, it ain't the heat, it's the humidity. And we're right, because that's a whole different level of, ugh. And so people are on edge. And then we look at society. People are just on edge. If you watch the news, it's designed to make your blood pressure go up, and then you get really frustrated with the state of things, and you maybe holler back at them, and that's not healthy, right? So what I want you to remember is that when making calls, it's not about you. What you're offering is a personalized solution to any questions they have. And if they don't have questions, you move along, but you've got to make the phone calls. So I'm going to go ahead and stop yelling at you about that now, because I'm right here. And by the way, y'all, I will tell you my script for calling people. You need to make outbound calls. In my office, the rule is one a day. I'm not hardcore because I know most of y'all are not going to sit down for an hour and pound the phones. And frankly, if you're in that kind of mindset, you might not be in relationship connectivity mindset. Just going to point that out. But one call a day you can make. And it basically is, hey, Tony, I saw your name in my phone. I just thought I'd say, hey, what you doing? You don't have to say gross, icky things like, hey, who do you know that's looking to buy or sell? Because that's gross. You also don't have to call people and say, the market's moving. Who do you know that's moving? Some of our really old, terrible lines that have been trained for years that make us equate ourselves in real estate with used car salesmen. And I know some great used car salesmen, by the way. So Tony Stewart at mine at GMC in Concord is the best, but he also sells new cars. But he's not sleazy and gross. He's actually into relationship building too. So be careful slamming all used car salesmen. But anyway, what I was saying is, if you use old tired lines that don't sound like you, that's when you feel kind of sleazy and slimy. What if instead you just lean on the fact that it's a nice thing to check on somebody? Look, one of the things I'm working with my kids on, and my kids are 16 and 17, we have a constant running conversation about how small talk works, because their generation, no experience with small talk. They text, they message, they don't like to have conversations, but the social lubricant shouldn't actually be alcohol, and that's a crutch. Your best social lubricant is small talk. Oh my gosh, it's hot today. Well, how are you? So I heard your mama wasn't doing well. She better. Just start paying attention to people. That's what your phone call should look like. It should look like paying attention. And if they know you're in real estate, they might even say, well, what's going on with the market? And you can say, well, it's funny you should ask, because Leigh Brown told me I should be doing some research. And so I did. And they'll be like, who's Leigh Brown? You're like, never mind. She's this busybody mama hen realtor that bosses people around and tells them to say hey to strangers and tells them to do zip code research. But I did check out your research on your zip code this week, and here's what I discovered. Why not just say you're using these coaching calls as something to call people about? Think about how we've made this harder than it is, and you'll find out the hard part is getting started. The best part is after you get there. So anyway, whatever questions you have, drop them in the comments, send it to me by direct message. I'll see you back here next Thursday. And anything I can do to help, you just say, hey, and I will do everything I can to help you out, no matter what's happening in the markets. See ya.